Hello, everyone. This is Conversations with Rob. Please like and subscribe our videos on YouTube. And also, obviously, you'll probably be listening to us on the air if you know about the broadcast right now. I am interviewing somebody that I've learned about through a friend, and I think she's going to be a great congressional candidate. And she just announced a couple months back, Donna Deegan. She's an FSU grad, so go Seminoles. She's also—
There you go.
That's right. Heck yeah. Hopefully the football team will do better this year with the new coach. So we'll see.
Oh, please.
So Donna's also an author. She wrote a book about breast cancer and also marathon running, which she's an avid runner. And she also was a broadcaster on First Coast News, WTLV, and WJXX over in Jacksonville. And obviously, like I said, she's running for Congress. So Donna, thanks so much for coming on the program. We greatly appreciate having you.
Rob, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
All right, so Donna, so talk about growing up in Jacksonville. I'm from Rhode Island originally, if you can hear the accent. I'm a little Italian guy.
I would have never been able to tell, Rob. Never in a million years.
Well, I grew up as a middle-class guy in Rhode Island. My parents were probation and parole officers. So we know what it is growing up in the middle class. But if you could just tell the viewers about growing up and how you grew up.
Well, I was born and raised in Jacksonville, actually. Grew up on Jacksonville southside, and as you've already said, went to FSU. So I've always stayed fairly close to home. Always knew that I wanted to come back to Jacksonville. And so I was just really fortunate once I graduated from college to be able to come back and anchor the news for almost 25 years in Jacksonville. After a few jobs in other markets, was able to come back and anchor the news for a long time here. And then, in that time, I was diagnosed with breast cancer 3 times while I was on the news. So that's really was, that's really the transition of my life from news anchor to philanthropist. I started a foundation for underserved women with breast cancer to help them pay for their critical needs while they were going through treatment. And because I'm a marathon runner, started a race to go along with that so we could raise funds. So we actually have the only marathon in the country that is dedicated to breast cancer research and care in Jacksonville Beach, basically Jacksonville, Neptune, Atlantic Beach, where I'm from. And we have people from every state and about 20 countries that come in every year and help us raise money for that purpose and for breast cancer research. So I told you a lot of information in a little bit of time, but it's been fun to be a Jacksonville native and to bring all that back to Jacksonville.
So we are going to touch on some of the stuff you touched on a little bit with breast cancer affecting your life. And I know you said it, it happened 3 times while you were on the air. How did you bounce back? I know you talked about running your marathons and running a lot. And I'm, as a soccer guy and an avid runner myself, it does relieve a lot of stress. But, how did cancer it takes so much out of people with going through, all these medical procedures. How did that affect your life and being on the news at the same time?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a very vulnerable feeling to be in front of, again, I'm a hometown girl. I felt very embraced by the community, but it's a vulnerable feeling, losing your hair, getting sick in front of, hundreds of thousands of people. That's hard. And then when it happened a second time, I went to my boss and I said, look, I really don't want to talk about this all the time on the air anymore. I don't want this to become about me. What if I just start a blog, and that way I can communicate with the viewers about what I'm going through, and at the same time we don't have to talk about it on TV. And so that's really was the genesis of the Donna Foundation, because I started hearing from dozens of women who were telling me that they were choosing between putting food on the table for their kids and buying their medicines. And that's really, honestly, Rob, what started to change my whole focus in life. I think I lived a pretty privileged life, to be honest. I grew up in a middle-class family, but I always had everything I needed. I certainly had insurance. I always, once I graduated from college, had a good job. And I was hearing from people saying, look, we love you and we're praying for you, but at the same time, you should know there are those of us out here that have real challenges. And that was really the genesis of the foundation. It's why I decided to use the megaphone that was attached to my mouth to do something to solve the problem. And then, frankly, that hearing those stories over and over, and still today, here we are almost 20 years later, still hearing those stories. And it's really one of the things that drove me to run for office. It's just insane to me that we are still in a position where people are having to choose between medicine and putting food on the table. And so we need to change that. So it was sort of an evolution for me from the type of service I felt like I was doing as a journalist to philanthropy, and certainly being diagnosed with breast cancer. The third time came right as we were getting ready to launch our inaugural marathon. So I had been 5 years cancer-free when I was diagnosed for the third time. And frankly, that was a pretty dire diagnosis. The cancer had metastasized to my left lung. And I had to have part of my lung removed and go through chemo again. And I was very fortunate to be able to heal in time to run that inaugural marathon. But the big thing I learned was don't take a day for granted and do everything you can to help as many people as you can.
Right. Well, that's a great outlook that you have. So you did talk a lot about the Donna Foundation. Was it just the idea that, you talked to the viewers where you got the idea for the foundation, just them saying, hey, we're here for you, and there's a lot of people suffering with the same sort of details? Or is it something that just came to you as going through that? How was the idea that came about for the foundation?
It was absolutely hearing from those people. Absolutely. Because, it's not so often that you hear those stories outright. You hear about people's struggles with cancer and all the things they go through with chemo and radiation, all those things. But to hear the stories, one woman I remember called me and said, that she was in the middle of her course of treatment and she had to get dropped from her course of treatment because her husband, who was a construction worker, his truck broke down and he had to get another truck, which was a used truck. But the fact that he had a truck payment actually threw them off of Medicaid. The whole story was just so enraging to me that somebody in the middle of their treatment would have to even endure fighting for that treatment. And it was stories like that made me say, hold on a minute, I've got this big megaphone attached to my mouth. Let me embrace these underserved communities and see if we can do something to help people that are actually going through this disease and who don't have the means to pay for their critical needs while they're doing it. Now, obviously, there's only so much that a charitable organization can do on that front, but you have to do what you can do. And that was absolutely what drove me to start the Donna Foundation back in 2003.
Right. So I do want to get into a couple of media questions. First off, what made you get into media in general?
Well, I've always loved writing. Writing has been my love from the time that I was a little kid. And so I thought I would be a newspaper writer. Frankly, that's what I always wanted to do. And then decided as I got out of high school, I had one of the local news anchors who has since become a very good friend, was an icon in Jacksonville, come to speak to my class. And I thought, wow, women really are having some great opportunities in broadcasting. Maybe I should jump into that. And that's really what made me decide to go the broadcast route. But really it's writing. I've as you mentioned, I've written a couple of books. I love to write in general. So the opportunity to do that on a daily basis was very attractive to me.
Right. So Donna, you've worked in the media you did work in the media for quite a long time. We hear a lot of stuff on the media. Fake news, as with the president saying this stuff. We see a lot of fake Facebook posts, Twitter accounts. We heard about that in the 2016 election. And we're also, seeing all kinds of fake videos on YouTube too now. How has the media changed now with all this fake stuff coming out? And how do we believe, what's on the media? I guess what I should say is, how do we trust what's on the media when you hear all these different stuff is fake this, fake that? Now we hear Sinclair Broadcasting, which is a big conservative group. They bought a lot of local stations and they're kind of slanting the news toward conservative rhetoric. So how do we believe all this stuff now that's on media in general?
Well, let me just say, first of all, as I will always consider myself a journalist, whether I'm an active journalist or not. And I will say that I truly believe that 95% of your journalists out there are trying everything they can to give a fair picture of what they're reporting on. Now, I think what the president has done and what other people have done in terms of calling the media fake news, let me just say that if we don't have a free press, we don't have a country. So I'll put that out there first. I think that has done incredible damage. And I do think most reporters are out there trying to tell the story as it is. However, I agree with you that we do have the dawn of the 24/7 news cycle. It was predictable. It's one of the reasons, frankly, that I got out of news when I did. Yes, I wanted to spend time with the foundation and do more to volunteer on that effort. But at the same time, I felt that, and I still feel that the 24/7 news cycle, that push to have to come out with something all the time instead of your couple of major newscasts in the day, is the enemy of truth and enemy of any sort of proper vetting half the time. There's so much pressure to be first and to get the news out, and so I do think that's a problem. And I'm frankly saddened that we have people like Sinclair that are buying up so many news organizations and creating these now local news markets where you're literally just getting conservative news. So that's a problem. I wish that weren't the case. I do think that your vetted standard news outlets still are really trying their best to be fair. And I think the insinuation that the mainstream media has an agenda is ridiculous. I've been in newsrooms for 30 years, and they're basically a cross section of America. You have Democrats, Republicans, independents. You fight about things in the news meetings, and then you go out and you try to present things as fairly as possible. And that's what happens in newsrooms all over the country.
Well, in the 90s, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard about this because I'm big in politics, in news in general. In the 90s, they had, multiple, news stations. There was more than just kind of the four local channels. They had tons of, different avenues of news that weren't, pushed by conservative rhetoric now that, there is now. Did that kind of change? I know you say you left news or when this started happening. Is that when you kind of left news? It was like in the late 90s?
No, I didn't leave news until 2012. So I don't want to give you the impression that I left as it was happening. I'm just saying, as I saw that transition, I found myself day after day being that person in the news meetings that was saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, and it became less and less resonant with me. It didn't feel as though it was something that was as representative of what I like to present as I would like. And I think it doesn't mean I don't think people are still trying to be fair. I just think there's enormous pressure to create so much content now, and a lot of that content, it's just too fast. It's not. I don't know. I find that to be, as I said before, a challenge to make things accurate. So yeah. I mean, I think that when you look now, you can tie all this really back to the rise of Fox News. If you look at media markets around the country, and 70% of media markets around the country, Fox News is the #1 news organization in those markets. That's a problem with the news organization that has the stated purpose, basically, of creating a conservative majority. And they don't really care what they have to say to do it half the time. So at least the commentators, I certainly don't think the news people are that way, but I think the commentators are certainly that way. And I'm sure people would say the same thing about MSNBC. But the truth is, a lot of people look at Fox News and they think that's, truth telling. And most times, you're listening to folks who have an absolute agenda in what they're saying.
Right. So now I want to get into the second part of the interview about you running for Congress. What made you run for Congress?
I think a lot of things. I started after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. It really was a wake-up call for me. I really had always felt, I've been an NPA forever, and I really had always felt there were reasonable voices on all sides that were going to come to conclusions. Sometimes the people I agreed with more would win, and sometimes not, but I felt like we'd be okay. And after Donald Trump was elected, I dove in because I thought that was no longer the case. I was appalled, honestly, that we would elect Donald Trump. It was surprising to me because I just felt that he was so divisive and so negative, and I was just amazed that we would put him in office. And I thought, I don't want my kids to think that this type of rhetoric, this type of behavior is remotely normal or acceptable. So I got involved, and I became a surrogate for Andrew Gillum when he was running for governor in Florida. I was his surrogate in Duval County. Just an enormous believer in expanding Medicaid, and some of the things that Mayor Gillum was trying to get done, found him to be incredibly authentic, and really enjoyed that experience. Was on the trail with him a lot, canvassed every day, and I just felt energized by it. And when we lost, I was so disheartened by that narrow loss that we had. And I thought, if we don't do something about this now, I don't know if we're going to survive another 2-4 years of this in this country. And so I said, it's if I can do it and I can move some people, I need to do it. I need to go out and speak with people about bringing the country back together, bringing the districts back together. If we continue down this incredibly divisive path, I don't know that we survive as a democracy, honestly. I just don't know that we do. And so my talent, I believe, is in telling people stories. I've done it my whole life. I listen to everyone. I don't look down on people who believe differently than me. I simply feel that we have got to start looking at each other as humans again, and not as R's and D's, and start talking, or we're not going to make it. So I'm doing it because I don't want my children and your children to live in a country that seems almost at war with itself. And beyond that, just so many issues, like I've said to you, healthcare, climate, guns, all of those things. If we don't put different people in places of power, I'm afraid that those issues that are very important to the majority of people, and you can see in the polling that it is, are going to get ignored for the special interests. And I'm just not willing to sit by and let that happen.
Right. I was also a Gillum supporter, voted for him in the primary and the general. So I was definitely upset, as were you, about the loss. And
he's an amazing human being, truly. He's amazing.
Yeah, I saw that he threw a tweet out endorsing you. I think it was yesterday. I saw on your Twitter. Or that's correct.
Yeah, he and I are very good friends, and I have tremendous respect for him, and I believe he'll be back. I think he's a generational talent and an amazing public servant. So I hope he'll be back.
Agreed. I hope
In fact,
so too.
I know he'll be back.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear from you then. So let's talk about the issues. All right. Andrew Gillum did win Jacksonville by a decent margin. It wasn't huge, but it was good enough. And he did do better in some of these counties than Bill Nelson did, which a lot of people thought the opposite would happen. So let's talk about Jacksonville, where he won. You've been canvassing. You've been running for about, 3 or 4 months now, talking to a lot of constituents. What is the most important issues you're hearing from the constituency, but also what are the most important that you feel as a congressional candidate for yourself?
Well, again, I think given my background, if you look at both the polling and frankly, my lived experience, I think that they dovetail nicely. As a 3-time breast cancer survivor, I am adamant that we must have everybody covered for healthcare. People in this country deserve the right of healthcare, and I think that if you look at polling from Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, there is huge agreement on that. I believe it's more than 70% of the population believes that everybody needs to be covered, and yet there's disagreement on how to make that happen. So I'm open to the avenues to make that happen, but we have to make it happen, and that would be my number one priority, and what I'm hearing from most of the people in the district. Now, I will tell you that I'm in a very Republican district. It's a pretty red district, but I've heard from a great deal of Republicans and independent voters who have said, we are done with this chaos. We don't like the way our country is moving. We don't like the rhetoric. We want to find a pathway back to some peaceful discussion. And so I think we have a really good chance of bringing those people into the fold, especially women. I'm going to tell you, I've heard from a lot of women on all sides of the aisle. So I'd say the big issues that I've heard from most people are healthcare. Climate is incredibly important here. We have a military base here at the beach that is, it's at sea level. we're going to have problems as the sea level rise continues with that military base. We have streets that are flooding on sunny days, just like you guys do down in South Florida. There are problems. There are going to be problems with our water supply. So I'm hearing from a lot of people they're concerned about that. And the representative that currently holds the seat that I'm vying for really doesn't even recognize climate as an issue. So it's one of those things that people say, gosh, we need somebody in there that will actually address that. And then also the issue of guns. I will say that the Republicans in my district are very strong Second Amendment. I believe in the Second Amendment. I simply think that when you've got 93% of the population who's telling you that we need universal background checks, that we should accommodate those people. So those are the issues that I would say I'm hearing mostly from people, in addition to some other, local things, but mostly those are the big issues that people feel are not being addressed on a national level.
Right. Well, even though you said it's a Republican district, I believe if you have the right candidate, you can win a Republican district. I mean, we talked about it earlier on, just before this question, about Andrew Gillum winning in that district, which is, as you said, it's a Republican area, and he won that district by a few points. So I think you can do it, Donna, and especially, the area. You've been in that area as a broadcaster. You've, done the marathons. A lot of people through the foundation. So I think you've got what it takes, and you'll definitely do that. But
well, thank you.
But I do have some questions on some of the issues as you talked about.
Sure.
What is your question? I mean, what is your opinion rather on impeachment? We see a lot about this impeachment going on. Are you for it or against it?
Well, I certainly supported the vote that just occurred in the House. We're either a country of laws or we're not.
Right.
And I think that if the president decides he's going to do the things that he did, I mean, I just don't see how you allow a president of the United States to pressure a foreign leader for his own political gain and not hold that president accountable. I think the House did what they needed to do. Now what the Senate needs to do is actually hold a fair trial and call the witnesses that need to be called, so that the American people can see and everyone can make an informed decision on impeachment. I think right now it doesn't look like we're going in that direction, but I would certainly hope that there are enough Republicans, especially now that John Bolton has come out and said that he will testify. I'd like to think there are enough Republicans who would say, you know what, the American people who are overwhelmingly telling us they want witnesses, 7 in 10 Americans in several polls that have come out have said we want witnesses. Hopefully they'll do that and actually have a fair trial, and that way we can see what happens. But at this point, I think everything that has happened needed to happen.
Well, I think John Bolton testifying against Trump would be a game changer for the impeachment, and hopefully, that would change some Republican votes. But we'll move on to Iran now. You're in a military area as far as Jacksonville. That's a big, armed forces area with a lot of military in there. We have the base, as you talked about.
Yep.
We've seen Iran, I think was insane, the attacks that President Trump did on that military guy, because even though he's a bad guy, they said he was also, helping kill ISIS, which is a danger to us. What is your take on Iran? I think that, I'm worried that a guy as a millennial, this could be something like a World War III. We got Israel that could get involved now. Saudi Arabia could get involved, not to mention we have Iraq and Iran already involved. What is your take on this conflict right now?
Well, I don't think anybody wants to see a war with Iraq. Well, I shouldn't say anybody. I certainly don't want to see a war with Iraq, and I don't think that most of my constituents would like to see a war with Iraq or Iran. I think that in that region we've been in there so long, and I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what another conflict would serve us, except for to just lose more American lives. And I was really heartbroken the other day watching all of our soldiers leave from Fort Bragg. I just want to know what the end game is. I think that's the bottom line for me. I don't want to prejudge until I see all the facts of everything. I'm still waiting to see what the immediate threat was that caused us to go over there. I don't want to prejudge that. If there was an imminent threat, I just want to know what it was. So I'm not going to condemn something that I don't know enough about, but what I will say is it concerns me greatly that we would take such an escalatory position with a country like Iran. I don't think that that's something that will serve us well in the long term. So you're seeing what happened already. I don't know how the whole thing is going to end up. I don't know if that's going to be the end of it. But I would certainly hope that our president would take a step back now and say, okay, you know, let's try to de-escalate this situation as opposed to continuing this fiery, you know, war of rhetoric that really may lead us down a very unfortunate path. I don't want to see our servicemen and women lose their lives. And I never want to see that unless it's in the defense of this country and something that has to happen. And so I really, it's frustrating to me, honestly, because I hear people say, we'll support our troops. And I think that you can be patriotic and support our troops, and perhaps even more patriotic by saying, I don't want to put our troops in harm's way unless that's necessary. Right. And here we are marching more kids over there, and I just want to know the plan. I want to know that there's a plan. And right now, there certainly doesn't seem to be anything, at least that this president has been willing to tell us in terms of what the plan is.
This is a very secretive administration, and we got a maniac in the White House. So good luck with getting the plan and having him, you know, turn down the rhetoric. I don't think that's going to happen with this guy.
Well, I don't know. I guess what I'm hoping is, Rob, that at some point people will hold him accountable for that. And I guess that's really what it comes down to for me is that you know, you don't want to believe that our president would go and do something like that without you know, without cause. But at the same time, you know, because this administration has told so many untruths, so many lies over and over again, it's hard to trust anything that's being told to you. And right now there's not a whole lot that's being told to us anyway. So you know, it's a tough situation to be in, and you want to support our military and those decisions. And at the same time, I just don't want to see us lose people that we don't need to lose. And it's that's somebody's kid over there right now. And I would like for people to remember that.
Right. I support the troops. I don't support the person that has no foreign policy experience that's in the White House leading the troops. Well, we'll move on. Last question on as far as issues that I have. Two more questions, then we'll hit into a few fun questions so people can learn more about your personality and stuff. Last question, you talked about healthcare as a big issue on the campaign trail. We saw that in 2018, whether it was in Florida with Andrew Gillum with the Medicare expansion, or we saw that all over the country with all of our new elected candidates running on healthcare in 2018 that won. We hear a lot in the presidential primary right now with the Medicare for all, Medicare for people that don't want it, that want it rather, and a public option with Vice President Biden. What is your position on all these different healthcare plans in the Democratic primary? Because I'm sure that people that are constituents are asking you the same question.
Well, they are, but honestly, right now I'm trying to learn as much as I can about every plan that's out there. I don't want to limit myself and say this is the only way to go, because I honestly believe we have to do something where we can bring all voices into the room. I personally would be okay with a public option to start off with. I think we need to get people there. I'm sort of concerned that if we drove all the way to let's jump immediately into Medicare for all, I just don't think people are there. I don't think they're comfortable with it. If you look at, especially in my district, people want to keep their insurance. So as a representative of this district, I have to listen to that. And I think that as long as we can come together on a plan that covers everybody, I don't care if that is using private insurance companies and creating a public option or how we get there. We just have to get there. And I think that if we don't try to let all voices into that conversation, I'm afraid we don't get there at all. So my biggest concern is let's make sure we get everybody covered.
Do you agree that on healthcare, especially, we saw in the 90s with Hillary Care, we've seen Obamacare. Do you believe that it's the framing of the candidates, whether it's President Obama or was it Secretary Clinton, who was First Lady at the time, whether it's how we frame healthcare, as you just said. We want to make sure we cover everybody. We'll take all these different plans and, try to negotiate, see the best plan we can get. Do you feel like that? Because we look at Fox News, we've talked about that during the interview many times, and you've been in the media. How the narrative is on TV is how a lot of people get their news and how a lot of people feel. We say government overrun, government health care and stuff like that, and all these code words, socialist and communist. People don't even know what those words mean. Do you feel like it's a lot about the framing is how we get a lot of these issues done? Same thing on the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I do. I think, unfortunately, unless we can start talking to each other again as human beings, I think as long as a Republican says something, all the Democrats are going to hate it. And as long as a Democrat says it, all the Republicans are going to hate it. And if we could just stop caring about who gets credit for the ideas and just try to come up with something, I think we can get there. Because I don't care if you're talking to doctors or you're talking to insurance executives or you're talking to, I've talked to people all over the spectrum, and everybody says, yeah, we got to get everybody covered. They just disagree on how to get there. And honestly, that's the frustrating part, is I think that we've got to figure out how to talk to each other without just that polarized lens on our faces. It's frustrating to me that everybody seems to want something, and yet, well, I shouldn't say that. You have to get some of the special interests out of the conversation. There's no question about that. There's too many layers to the whole thing. But I do agree a lot of it comes down to how it's framed. This whole talk of socialists and communists, I said this yesterday to somebody. It's so frustrating to me because we have social programs in this country right now that people love. People don't want you to take away their Medicare. They want to pay for roads. There's so many things that are socially funded in this country, and why we allow ourselves to be sucked into those crazy labels. And I know it's a power grab is all it is, but it's very frustrating to me that, I heard Joe Biden called a socialist the other day. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's insane. But that's what's happening, and it's all about retaining power. So yeah, it is about how you say it, but it's also about having the conversations honestly and seeing each other as people as opposed to just party labels. And that's really important to me.
Right. No, I agree with you. Police, fire, it's all socialist stuff. Medicare, Social Security, those are all social programs. But
well, they're social programs, right? And it's not the same at all as socialism. And people need to, if we fail to make that distinction as Democrats during this election, then I don't know what happened to us. We have to make that distinction. People have got to understand that this is simply a lie, that we're not socialists, that social programs are not the same. And I say it every time I give a talk. I make sure I say, I'm a capitalist, by the way. Just want to say, if anybody says I'm not a capitalist, they're not telling the truth. So it's sad that we have to say that.
Again, Donna, these people don't even know what those words mean. They just repeat what they hear on television or on the internet. So I wouldn't even worry about it. But
well, yeah, you have to worry. You have to worry about it because because a lot of people end up believing that stuff. So I think all I'm saying is I think we need a narrative where we address it. I think we have to address it. I don't think we can ignore it. And I think that's why I think that all of our candidates have to make clear, hey, I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist.
Right. No, I hear you. But so coming on to, before we get to the fun questions, the last two quick questions. Do you have a favorite candidate in 2020? It looks like to me that we're pretty much down, looking at the polls, to Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Do you have a difference of opinion there? And also, do you have a favorite candidate?
Yeah, I don't really want to pick a favorite, honestly, because I will obviously support whoever gets the nomination with every fiber of my being. I think any one of the Democratic candidates would be so far preferable to what we have right now that it's I'm happy with whoever the voters choose, and I'll be glad to support that person.
Fair enough. Last question before we get into the fun questions. What politician do you feel like you base a lot of your policies on? Do you have a politician that you kind of look up to that you say, hey, I agree with a lot of what he or she says?
I really like to think I have my own mind. I said, I spent the huge majority of my time as a voter and as a journalist, as an NPA. I'm really very used to looking at all sides of an issue and trying to ferret out what is the truth nugget in there, or at the very least, places of commonality. And I think more than any other time in history, we need that right now. So I will tell you that over my lifetime, what I have looked for in every single politician that I have ever supported personally is authenticity. Authenticity and a desire to do the right thing. People that are beholden to special interests don't really attract me very much.
No, yeah.
So I'm just attracted to authentic people who have a vision, and so I wouldn't say any particular politician beyond that. I think that is what I strive to be, and I just strive to try to be a person that will listen, as opposed to a person who has set beliefs that won't waver based on information. And I think that's what people should know about me, that I am here in this race to listen to the constituency and to try to do what is the very best for the folks in CD4, and I think that's what's resonating right now with the folks where I am.
All right. So as we end the interview right now, a few fun question, one-word answers. What's your favorite color?
Oh, my favorite color is blue.
Blue? I like blue. Democratic blue. I hear you. All right. Favorite kind of music and musical artist?
Favorite by far is U2. I'm a U2 freak.
Oh, nice.
In fact, my husband and I just got back from Tokyo. We plan our vacations sometimes around U2 tours, and so we had never been to Asia, and we said, well, hey, U2's going to Asia, let's go to Tokyo and see U2. So we planned that about a year ago before I jumped into the campaign. So that was quite the interesting trip. But yeah, so that's probably my favorite musical. In fact, not probably, absolutely my favorite musical group.
So you talked about traveling to Tokyo. Where is the place that you traveled to that you've liked or loved the most?
Well, my favorite place on earth is probably, aside from where I am right now, so home is always my favorite, but my favorite travel spot is Costa Rica. I love Costa Rica. The people there are fabulous, and my husband is a huge surfer and loves to surf, and it's just a great place to relax and be around good people. Now,
you surf also, or is it just your husband?
I do a little bit, but not nearly on his level. He's a pretty good surfer. I dabble in the smaller waves myself.
That's okay. At least you're giving the effort. And who do you idolize in your life?
Idolize. Idolize is a really strong word. There are so many people that I look up to. I mean, if you're asking about historical figures, I think Martin Luther King Jr. is certainly a favorite historical figure that I model a lot of things after. I am so. My mantra in life is love over fear, and I believe that we have to get to that mentality somehow, where we stop being agitated, aggravated, and driven by fearful visions, and we start actually seeing humanity again. And so I'd say he's probably one of the folks that's at the top of my list for people that I idolize.
Okay. And last question, where can people find more about you? Where can they buy the book and find out more about the foundation?
Well, the foundation is the donnafoundation.org. Like I said, we provide critical needs for folks with breast cancer diagnosis, and with the marathon that's coming up on February 9th. We'd love for you to come and run with us for the foundation. That would be great too. We raise money for that purpose there. That you can find out about that at breastcancermarathon.com. And I think my book is probably available at both of those places. But then also anybody who's interested in learning more about the campaign can go to donnadeeganforcongress.com and learn about that. So would love anybody's eyeballs on all that stuff.
Now, will you be, I talked to quite a few candidates that are in primaries and running. Will you be having like, say somebody is in South Florida and they like this interview, besides donating, of course, would they be able to do like phone calls from home and texting from home, even if they're in like a different part of the state?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Once we have over 500 volunteers that have signed up already to help our campaign. We had our volunteer kickoff a couple of nights ago, and we had more than 200 people stepped into somebody's house. There's a lot of excitement up here, and we'll get into all that. Absolutely, we're going to need people on the phones. We're going to need people, doing postcard campaigns. We're going to need people helping us, in all sorts of ways. So yes, we would love volunteers wherever we can find them. In fact, I think we're actually going to be coming down to South Florida for a couple of events. So yeah, I think at this point, I would say this to everybody. We need to compete everywhere, and we need to support candidates everywhere, up and down the ballot. And I think that's how we win, especially in Florida, in a 0.5% state. Right. You have to give people a reason to come out to the polls. And I tell you, if we don't have a reason this year, I don't know if we're ever going to have a reason. Right. But I'm hoping we have this massive turnout all over the state, because we need it. We need it. We desperately need a change. And I'm excited with all the just inspiration that I've seen so far. People are fired up, and I'm excited to see that.
Well, we need that, Donna, for you over in Jacksonville. We need that for whoever the nominee is for the Democratic Party, because we desperately need changes in this country. I'm sure you hear it all the time with healthcare. People paying high premiums. It's the guns, which having shootings as a person that's in education, shootings in the school. It's it's scary to be a teacher to even walk in there. We got all sorts of problems in this country. We need to get Medicaid also in the state of Florida too, for people that need help. Absolutely. So Donna, thanks. Go ahead. True. Sorry.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. It was my biggest sadness over and obviously there's so many things in this state I'd like to change, but to be only one of 13 states that hasn't expanded Medicaid. A recent study came out that says we've lost 2,800 people as an average. What they think we've lost because we haven't expanded Medicaid. That is such a no-brainer. The federal money that should be coming to Florida is going to other places. It's not like it's not being spent. So we need. I hope at some point that this administration opens its eyes to that. We need to expand Medicaid in Florida, but that's one of so many things. You're right. So hopefully people realize that. I always say, vote like your life depends on it, but it really does. So so I hope people will get out and vote.
Yeah, as you said, 30,000 votes in the governor's race, less than 12 in the Senate race, and 18 close elections. So we got to get out there and vote. So.
Yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Donna.
I really appreciate it, Rob. It was fun talking to you.
All right. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Good luck. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.